What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by writer, creator John Jackson Miller. Welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here.
I'm actually so glad that we get to talk. I picked up your book at GalaxyCon Columbus last December.
Oh yeah.
Signed it. Batman Resurrection is a great book. You've got the next installment coming up, Batman Revolution. And I want to hop into all things about your writing. Look at that. It looks so good. The question
It's
mark.
huge. It's a book. It's a very first copy.
So good. Before we hop into the books, I kind of want to know, like, growing up, did you always have a love, nostalgia kind of for pop culture, for Batman and stuff like this?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a house where being into comics and movies and everything was really encouraged. A librarian mother, older sister who was introduced me to all different parts of pop culture. Made sure I got in to see Star Wars when it came out. And so yeah, some of the things that I found on my own. Batman I kind of found on my own as a comics fan. He took a little longer because I would see Batman on TV as Adam West, and in fact, I remember I was growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, and they interrupted Batman in the afternoon. They interrupted Batman to announce that Elvis had died. Because it was a show that was on. They would have the two
Yeah.
episodes in the afternoons, and so and also at that time the Batman that was on CBS on their Saturday mornings. This was, very much sort of inspired by that version. Not quite as goofy, but there's still Batmite.
Right.
And so, I did not actually embrace Batman early on. I was very much a Marvel zombie. Not because of their TV shows, which again were kind of a mess, but the Hulk was good, but it was the show that was least like the comic book.
Right.
But yeah, I find my way into Batman, thanks to Marvel exporting Frank Miller, who I'd already you've been reading in Daredevil, and it's like, okay, well, then we get Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One and Killing Joke and just everything that goes on there. And so yeah, I've always been into all the comics. I've always been into all the movies. I've always been sort of immersed in this sort of thing. On my website it says I strip mine my childhood for a living. And even though my Batman fandom comes from later than childhood, it is a major part of my life because of when the 1989 movie hits and how it hits and what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. So at what point did, growing up being such an avid reader, being in a household, did writing come naturally, or when did you kind
Oh
of
yeah.
figure out that you wanted to just be a writer as well?
Right from age 6, I was drawing my own comic strips, my own comics, and Miller Comics was my company, and of course I was only doing one copy of everything. Later on, my dad would get a photocopy machine, and I would actually start more seriously doing fanzines and things like that, and mini comics. That where I was at that point, I was in touch with fandom, and I was sending things out and around. And then, of course, I was also writing stories. I had a little novel series. All the novels were just like 12 pages long, typewritten on my mother's typewriter, and that she had given me. And so, yeah, I was encouraged to always, you know, do this sort of thing. I kind of knew that I could. The city of Memphis had a writing competition in the junior high and high school called Wordsmith. And not only did I win the gold medal in seventh grade, or was it, yeah, I guess it's seventh grade, but I had, my score was so high that I dragged the entire team across, so we got the team medal too. um, but and so I always got this feeling, yeah, I kind of know what I'm doing. I have the tools. I just don't have any place to play. I don't have any, I don't have a, there's no place for my band to go. And so really the outlet was for the longest time, just, I was doing those mini comics into college, well into college. And, it only really happens that, when I graduate, after 1989, I'm the editor of the campus newspaper. I assigned myself the Batman movie to go review. Ended up seeing it 12 times there over the course of the next year. Just got the 13th time this past weekend because Milwaukee had Batman in concert. So I was 35 years between showings in the theater. But no, it would not be until I in my mid 20s I got a job in the comics business writing for the company that published Comics Buyer's Guide. Comics Buyer's Guide was the weekly newspaper that I read for years and years, and they brought me up to work with Don and Maggie Thompson, who were the editors of that magazine, and I was running the trade magazine for the business. Comics retailer, and then that led years later to me meeting folks at Marvel and getting to write Iron Man, and that led to Star Wars and everything else. Although I did continue doing the thing where I write about comics. I run a website called Comicron, which is basically it's the world's largest database of comic book sales figures. And again, that's just something I did over the years. Not doing it so much now because the sales charts all went away during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I still have most of the well, I don't have everything. Nobody has everything, but I have a lot of stuff left from the 1960s and 70s and 80s and 90s that I have yet to publish on the site and elsewhere. And I'm going to be doing that.
Wow. So Batman 89 seemed like
Yeah.
it was a monumental moment. You said you saw it
Yeah.
12 times in a year in the
Yeah.
theater. And then so what about that movie, as we get into
Yeah.
talking about your books, that just drew you in so much that it seemed like it captivated you and that you had to pursue stuff with this now?
I've been doing at the conventions this year. Chicago just did it in GalaxyCon, Iowa, Richmond, Raleigh. I've been doing a slideshow called "The Legacy of Tim Burton's Batman," and the thesis of it is that it is the most important comic book movie ever, and that it changes everything. It doesn't just change people's, the way that the way that Hollywood approached comics, but it approached the way the general public thought about comics. Batman, of course, had started in the 1930s as a guy with a gun because he was a film noir villain, tying into the whole thing of or not villain but hero, tying into the whole thing with the Shadow and the Phantom and characters like that. Batman in one of the early issues, he kills all the vampires on Earth with a gun, and it isn't until he starts softening up and continues to soften up through the 50s, and then with the Comics Code happening, he goes very far into more or less almost a self-parody into the 60s. And this is against the flow of what's happening with the rest of the Silver Age. Marvel has got its more serious characters. Fandom has developed by this point. I think it was the Alley Awards, which was one of the fandom awards that was out at the time, in the fanzines that were coming out in the 60s. Don and Maggie actually ran one of the fanzines. Their awards, I think multiple times the Batman series won the award for a series most in need of improvement. And it's like, oh, well, this is not really a great award to get. But again, it was because, it was very much, targeting children at that point. And the TV series locks that in the 60s. And I don't say anything now against the TV series, but I think a lot of people resented it for a lot of years, not because of its success or its portrayal of this sunny goofy version of Batman, this campy version of
Mhm.
Batman. Because everybody at the time knew it was campy. Mad Magazine calls it out for being campy like 2 months in. But I think though what happened is the people that make decisions about movies and the people that make decisions about TV shows and the people that don't know anything about comics, they were kind of locked into that picture of comics because that was the most successful thing we'd seen to date.
Mhm.
And so I mentioned those Marvel TV shows. Not serious.
Right.
The Doctor Strange movie was actually pretty good, in general they were not serious. The review that TV Guide did of the Incredible Hulk series was really I again that's in that's I put that slide up because the reviewer is saying, this thing could never work. It would never work. Why didn't they do it campy like Batman? Because nobody wants to see a serious version of superhero characters. That's not what they are.
Hmm.
And and that was kind of what we're dealing with
Yeah.
when in the mid 80s, thanks to the fact that we've got comic shops, we don't have the comics code anymore. We've got the Frank Miller stuff, we've got the Alan Moore stuff, we've got Claremont and all the other people who are doing more serious versions of characters, and we're actually expanding our horizons. And there's a fear at that point. That was really the last time, the mid 80s to the late 80s. If you go back and look at Comics Buyer's Guide pages, that was the last time there was a real serious threat of government censorship following what had happened in the 50s. Because cable TV was getting people, guests on the Larry King show or whoever, where they're talking about, those kids comics, they're not for kids anymore or whatever, and it was because everybody's view was locked in, Adam Westworld,
Yeah.
and what happens is we get Michael Uslan, who, the Superman movies had been successful, trying to do them relatively straight, but again, that kind of falls apart and gets sillier as it goes along with Richard Pryor and everything, and Marvel doesn't get any air support either from Howard the Duck.
Right.
And so we're kind of in this position where we come up to the approaching movie. Michael Uslan has bought the rights to Batman with the intention of making sure that this movie is serious. And if this movie isn't serious, it's not going to get made. And it goes through multiple iterations of screenwriters and how, directors and how it's going to happen. And when it settles on Tim Burton and Michael Keaton, the fans went berserk. It was not an urban myth. The letters, were out there. People who would later be important people in publishing were writing letters saying things to the effect of, "This thing is going to set us back 15 years."
Mhm.
Us back 15 years.
Mm.
What does that mean? It means that everything we've done to make our medium more literary, more respectable, more adult, is going to fall by the wayside. And every article about Batman, every article about comics was still being led with Biff Pow Bam. It was being led with holy guacamole. A guy opens comic shop. Even the article that the New York Daily News ran about Marvel being bought in November '88 was the headline was Biff Pow Bam. And again, we kind of roll our eyes with it now, but back then it was like, okay, we can't get no respect. We're like Rodney Dangerfield
Yeah.
here. And this movie was scaring everybody. And
Mhm.
so they rushed out a trailer that had no music, had no title, had no anything, didn't have the logo. They rushed out a trailer at the end of December of 1988, ran with Tequila Sunrise, which is ironically a Michelle Pfeiffer movie. And the word I had heard from various sources was more people went to see that movie for the trailer than for anything else, because we get we get the Batmobile with the machine guns and everything else,
Mhm.
and then we get the final real trailer in advance of what is, I think, the most successful advertising campaign for a movie ever. And it changes things. And I was there at the end of that first sneak preview showing with all the people at my college town. I had been worried sick all day, and everybody's cheering as the music is rising and as the camera is climbing to go see. It's actually not Michael Keaton. It's actually I think Carl Newman, who's the movement double on top of the building. Uh, 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 but everybody's cheering, and my immediate thought was this movie has just redeemed comics in the popular culture, not just Batman, but comics in general. It will never be the same. I do not see Sam Raimi's Darkman, which is not even a comic book movie, but I don't see that movie getting as wide an opening as it gets without it. I
Mhm.
don't see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that next year getting as wide an opening without it. And then by the time you get to 90, 91, 92, further into it, you're getting to see films that are actually directly impacted by it. The Rocketeer, you get The Flash on TV in 90. You get the Batman animated series in 92 coming along right after Batman Returns. And I just who can believe for a second that you would get a movie 5 years later in The Crow
Mm.
that
Right?
yeah, a comic book movie based on a small press title, a violent rock opera. Who would greenlight that back then based on, oh, it's a comic book movie?
Mm.
Well, no, they did. And again, even though Batman himself would go back, to being sillier in later iterations, that was okay because it was this is a long-term project,
Right.
and we would get more Batman, and we would get a version for the tastes of everyone later.
Yeah. So so when did you have this idea for these books? These books take place in between
Yeah.
Batman and Batman Returns.
Yeah, I didn't have an idea for these books because I didn't think they were possible. I've written for Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, all these other tie-in books. But I didn't think that this was something where you could license just the Tim Burton movies. And in fact, my editor on Star Wars, I had just done a novel, or I was in the middle of doing a novel called Star Wars: The Living Force at Random House, and Tom Holler, my editor, said, you saw the movie 12 times, didn't you? And I'm like, yeah, I got the ticket stubs. And DC had just done its first round of Batman '89 comics
Mm.
that were really built just on the Tim Burton movies, written by Sam Hamm, who was one of the co-screenwriters, drawn by Joe Quinones, who is one of my former artists on Star Wars comics. And you know, they set their stories well after Batman Returns, and they said, well, let's do a couple of books right here in between, or not in between. I said, let's do them in between, because I said I wanted to stay out of their way.
Yeah.
Um, this way, you know, people keep saying, are they in canon together? Are they in continuity? Whatever. That is beyond my pay grade. There really isn't a person with a hat on it saying, canon master on top. But what I do is, I try to make sure that my stuff fits with their stuff,
Mm.
so that if you want to read them both, there were in between the first graphic novel and the second graphic novel for Batman '89. There start to become places where it gets disjointed, or not,
Mm.
where it doesn't flow perfectly. But I can say that as of the end of Revolution, everything fits. So, I that's the kind of work I do all the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, the idea was, let's put something in between the two movies. Let's answer some of the big questions, like, the obvious ones, like what happened to Vicky Vale, where did Alexander Knox go?
Mm.
What's happening there? but also the important question is like, why did he keep doing this whole thing when unique to the Tim Burton movies, the Bruce Wayne in the films is the only one whose parents were killed by the Joker.
Mhm.
And if the Joker is on, flat on the ground over here, he's assumed room temperature. There's absolutely no reason for him to continue doing this thing, if that's resolved his whole thing, if that was all it was about. And so, Alfred wonders, Vicky wonders, and so we got to deal with this in Resurrection. I got to address questions that I had had right from my second review that I ran, because I was running the place and I said I'm going to do two reviews, uh, and and literally plot elements. Yeah, I think there's a comics buyer's guide article or a column of mine back from like '99 where I said, here's how I would bring the Joker back. And I got to riff on that idea. And I got to riff on it because Tom and the team at DC, the team at Warner Brothers were willing to let me explore this.
Mhm.
I made sure that what we did fit with and felt like it rhymed with the Tim Burton movies and material. The version of Clayface that we have in the first book, very much, I think, is a character that you can visualize existing in a Tim Burton movie. He's somebody who is tragic, and there's also a comic element to him. And there's definitely a thing running through, particularly Batman Returns, where there was a review of the movie that said Batman Returns was an opera about loneliness. Gene Siskel had said, this is a unique movie because you're not really so much hoping for the good guy to beat up the bad guy as you want everybody to kind of come to some sort of a psychological equilibrium at the end.
Oh.
Heal some of these people. And, we kind of see that, Bruce, because he's got Alfred, because he's, in a different place from, uh, from, uh, from Catwoman in terms of revenge, and
Mhm.
he's a different place from the Penguin in terms of what happened to him and his parents. Things end differently. Well, there's very much, I think, that element in both Resurrection and Revolution, where our hero and our villains are using this canvas of this poor city,
Mhm.
and they're using all these heavy weapons to work their stuff out, to try to deal with their issues on a pretty big level. It's just that, the Joker in particular, his issues had a body count.
Yeah. So when you're obviously you want to tie these characters into the Burton universe, like that's
Yeah,
important. How do you kind of approach when you figure out a character that you're going to use, like to put your spin or the Burton spin on a
yeah,
character that we haven't seen in that? Because we've seen
yeah,
variations of Clayface throughout animation and comics.
yeah.
We've seen variations of Riddler even in the movie. So how do you kind of figure out what your direction and what your spin is going to be on these characters?
Well, this is the right way to ask the question. The wrong way to ask the question is what everybody asked, was just who would you fan cast as these characters? I was like, well, that's the second question because you got to write the character first,
Right.
and so I'm like, well, what do we know about what they did? Well, we get the Batman with a gun in the Tim Burton first movie. We get Batman in the 30s, and Michael Uslan himself told me that yeah, Batman in the 40s is kind of the second movie. It's the expansion of the Rogues Gallery. And he also said that if you kept on going, the next movies kind of fit with the next decades in the
Mhm.
Batman comics. Um, but I figured, all right, well, he would almost certainly have used the Clayface from the Golden Age, who was the actor who is not the Shambling Mound. They wouldn't have had CGI, so it would have been somebody who would have been much more, a universal monster sort of person. Instead of making him the famous actor, I make him the frustrated actor. I take a spin on it that we hadn't seen before. And then this is kind of what I do as well with the Riddler and other characters. Um, I just could not see the Riddler that we've seen in other parts of the franchise as fitting within a Tim Burton movie. The whole idea of the Riddler. Oh, I'm going to here's a riddle, and I'm going to if Batman can solve it, he gets to arrest me. Or here's a riddle, but it's actually a trap. I just can't see Michael Keaton falling for any of that. And so what I've got is I've got a Riddler who lives his life answering questions, but also who's been forced into a position where he has to ask questions. And so our back cover, question everything.
So good.
That is in my own hand. That is people will realize what that motto means when they get into the book.
Mm.
And this is a Riddler who is what I wanted to do is approach Gotham City as well. There was a life in the city before this. Batman's not necessarily the only person doing this, and he's not necessarily the best person doing this in terms of the detective stuff. I wanted to show a Riddler who was as good at solving mysteries as crafting them. And where it all came out of a place where there's a logical reason to do what he's doing, and where it's not just done because it's a flourish. Well, I mean, certainly it's a flamboyant character that we've got here, and he has lots of flourishes, but there should not be a moment in here where you go, well, why is he doing that? He's just going to get caught if he does that.
Right. That's that's so good. So one of the things I think, reading both these books of for me is I appreciate is I think you could read these as standalone books easily, but I think
Yeah,
they complement each other so well.
yeah.
So as someone's coming into, this new one that's coming out, Batman Revolution, what's the kind of the pitch? We've kind of leading into it a
Yeah,
little bit with the Riddler
yeah.
of
Well, second movie, Batman Returns. You don't have to have seen Batman to be able to enjoy it.
right.
It just helps it. It enhances the whole
Mhm.
thing. Batman Returns is set at Christmas. Batman Revolution is set during the 4th of July and the weeks that lead up to it. It's sort of the long hot summer that's starting in Gotham City. Again, something we haven't seen before. Gotham City is an unhappy place. We see that in these two films. The Joker is able to lure scads of people to a place where they know he's a serial killer. They know he's tried to kill them already, but he's going to dump a lot of money on the crowd, so they're going to go and they're going to make a big party of it. We've seen that, and so I figured, all right, we've seen Gotham City's mobsters. We've seen the Gotham underworld. Let's go after the underground. Let's take a look at the various forces that are around, and particularly, I wanted to make use of the fact that there is this hybrid world of 1939 and 1989, which we get in those films, where the technology is sort of a mesh of all of it. The styles that people are wearing is sort of a mesh of all of it. Bruce Wayne and Vicky Vale, they have the most modern clothes. The villains have the most modern technology, but everybody else is sort of, in this sort of middle zone. And well, I'm like, well, that leads me to a lot of political movements that there's all sorts of them that were in there, and particularly if Tim Burton's going to create a story with characters like these, there's going to be some very wild and interesting people. And so that is kind of the way I came at that part of it. We have a city where we have a couple of different poles. We have the good billionaire in Bruce, but we also have Max Schreck, and we have quite a lot of quite a lot more Max Schreck in the second book than the first, where he is somebody who is he is more willing than Bruce is to be the public face of his own money,
Mhm.
and he's not as benevolent, but yet they are not open enemies because we haven't gotten to that point yet. I am respectful of the character's situation as it is in between these films.
Yeah. Do, I I was originally going to ask, like, did you have to do a lot of research of like watching the movies as you're writing to kind of make sure they stay in? But apparently, if you watched it 12 times as a kid, I'm sure
Well,
it's
yeah,
pretty
and
buried in your memory.
when I was at Batman concert this weekend, I was able to even tell where they dropped lines out because they actually had to, because what they do is they have an audio track for the concert version where certain places you can't have the audio, the dialogue, and it's like the line "Shall we dance" is missing because it's right over. Or something they couldn't parse out. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got all the lines memorized, and everything. I did have to, in the first book, I had to make sure, for example, that one of the side characters, Lawrence, he gets a pretty big role. I had to make sure that he didn't die. And if you go back and look at the actual film, he does not. I did notice that in the concert track, he has a much longer scream, but that was when they remastered it. So the concert track is not the actual correct one in terms of which I'm going with. So there's that. Things like what specifically was on the newspaper headlines when his parents died, and that sort of thing. I that took some freeze framing, but
Yeah.
everything is in there. There are characters. There's a surprise villain in the first book that we actually do see in the first movie, and there is somebody who has the same job as the Riddler in the second book, who we also see in the first movie just for a second or two. But Alexander Knox actually calls to him. So again, these are fun little tidbits here.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that we haven't, I want to respect your time as you're,
Yeah.
writing is there anything about this book, about this franchise that we haven't hit on that you really wanted to mention and highlight?
I will say, it is for me. It's been pure fun,
Yeah.
and I have really tried to respect the source material. This is not just a thing where I'm trying to answer the questions of what happened to or whatever. We are the connective tissue, so it is part of my job to get you from point A to point B.
Mhm.
Although exactly where point B is relative to the next films, there's still 2.5 years at least in between these films. But again, I'm trying to bring you back to that world and give you a feeling of what it's like to actually live in that city and be a character in that city. And I keep saying city, like the movies, we never leave the city.
Yeah.
We never leave. We never leave the environs of the city and then the county where the manor is. That's the thing that feels weird when we see Keaton in the Flash. Is simply, first of all, we see him out in daylight,
Right.
which we never did, and then also he's not in the city. The city was a big part of that. So I guess what I'm trying to do is tell a story inspired by these movies that really I think I'm hoping that it fits and it enhances people's enjoyment of it. Going back and watching the movies again helps. I've had people say, they've gone back and watched after reading the book, and then they have to go read the book again.
Right.
Well, I think that's what tie-ins are supposed to do. I mean, that's what I'm supposed to. And again, hopefully, we're giving people, a good chance of some entertainment. People have said, doing a trilogy? And I'm like, it's already 2.5 books. So it really is one big story that's in between these two.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And I think people ask that question because they're so entertained by
Yeah,
like what you're putting out.
I appreciate it.
And like there is like, as I finished this one, I was like, man, I want more in this universe. Like, and I've read the comics as
Well,
well of those. So
we always try to write everything in tie-in fiction. We try to write everything as if it's the last story.
right.
But I didn't have that problem with this with regard to Resurrection, because I already knew it was a 2 book deal. That I'm gonna do both of these, more or less right on top of each other, and that is why I think these 2 books really are knitted together pretty solidly.
Yeah. Because they were so tied in and you knew you were doing this, were you writing them both in kind of tandem, or was it mostly?
No, I was writing the outline of the second
Okay.
book.
Yep.
We knew what was in it, and we knew who was in it, and I knew how I wanted to approach them and everything. No, I mean I did do a trilogy once for Star Trek called Prey, Prey, as in pray that it'll be on time, where I wrote all 3 books simultaneously. Where it was, I had book one, in proofreading at the same time that I had book two in, first round of proofreading at the same time that I was finishing book three, where it's all knitted together perfectly. There's not a word wrong in anything because it's like I wrote them all together because I did. But the case is, the case here is, I most of the actual manuscripting was done after the first book was complete.
Okay. So, well, John, I want to respect your time. Gang, if you have not picked up Batman Resurrection, go do it.
It's out now in
Absolutely.
hardcover, audiobook, ebook, and there is a trade paperback already out for the first book.
Excellent.
So, but you're going to want the hardcover because it will go with the second book. Second book, we're doing the worldwide release, is October 21st, hardcover, audiobook, and ebook. I have a bunch of signings that I'm doing in Wisconsin, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi that week. Beforehand, though, we're doing a sneak preview sale of the book at New York Comic Con all weekend long at the Random House booth, 3201. And the first 2 days, we have signings where it's me and Michael Uslan, the producer of the movies, who has been a real big supporter of the book. And it'll be wonderful to be able to sign these books with him because he's really the reason that we have them. So
Yeah.
that's coming soon.
And yeah, bring Michael's book then too and get that signed because that's a great book too.
Excellent. Excellent.
So, where can people follow along with you, stay up to date with what you got signings and things like that? What's the best route for people?
Okay, my website is farawaypress.com. That's got my events list and everything on it. I am farawaypress.com. That's my handle on Blue Sky. I am John Jackson Miller on Instagram and Facebook and Threads, and then I am JJM Faraway on Twitter or whatever it's calling itself these days.
Nice, perfect. So, gang, go pick up Batman Revolution in October when it drops. Or if you're going, and I know my listeners and viewers are going to be at New York Comic Con, go stop by your booth. What's the booth again?
3201 is the Random House
Random
booth.
House
They'll,
booth.
they'll have
Okay.
the book for sale. But I will also, all weekend, I will be at table 5 in the writer's block, which is right at the front of Artist Alley. And I'll have all of my stuff there, just not the new book.
All right. So, well, John, thank you so much just for taking some time to just talk about fandom Batman that we both love so much. So,
I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
yeah, with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.